we saw purple haze. One and one is three. Hey, hey, baby, what you do to me?
Invited me to participate in a debate he had organized here in Washington on precisely the broad theme that is central to the cases I've been discussing, as well as the war on marijuana and other substances, namely whether the majority's views of morality can ever justify laws that restrict individual freedom. Under Scalia's approach, of course, laws criminalizing marijuana use could continue to be enforced no matter how overwhelming the evidence about marijuana's lack of harm, or even indeed to its positive benefits. So these are the broad philosophical and constitutional issues that are at stake in NORML's essential efforts, with many important practical implications as well for all of us, even beyond those concerning marijuana itself. The ACLU's view, along with John Stuart Mill, is that government may not regulate voluntary conduct by mature individuals just because that conduct offends prevailing notions of morality. And we believe that this view is reflected in American government and law correctly understood. After all, as the Declaration of Independence proclaimed, all men, which I take to include women as well, all people are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And governments are instituted to secure these rights. In other words, we all have fundamental rights just by virtue of our common humanity. We don't need any government or any laws to give those rights to us. Rather, one of government's highest purposes is to secure our inherent human rights. In short, government's mission is to protect our rights, not to curb them. By the way, since I'm speaking about the Declaration of Independence, I assume you realize that early drafts of the Declaration were written on paper made from that plant that played such an important role in our nation's early history, hemp. In the same vein, I assume you know that marijuana was one of the major painkillers in colonial America. Apparently, it was relied on by none other than the founder of our country, the venerated George Washington, to alleviate the painful dental problems that plagued him all his life. Given how important hemp and marijuana were to our founders, I'm sure they would be shocked at our current prohibition. As one historian wrote, by the second half of the 1800s, fluid extracts of hemp were marketed by Parke Davis, Squibb, Lilly, and Burroughs. Another company manufactured cannabis cigarettes as an asthma relief. All these products were sold at modest prices without a prescription at neighborhood pharmacies. Those were the days when drugstores were drug stores, the good old days. Not only would America's founding generations be shocked at our current criminalization as a practical matter, depriving them of access to a plant that was widely used, including for medicinal and recreational purposes, they would also be shocked at the corruption and distortion and discrimination that brought about this policy, not any legitimate concern with public health and welfare. In preparing for this talk, I reviewed the history of our marijuana criminalization in 1937, and once again was shocked at the blatant violations not only of individual rights, but also of the democratic process. After all, it's bad enough if majoritarian preferences are allowed to ride roughshod over individual rights, as I've explained. But worse yet, if the policy in question isn't even supported by a majority, but rather is instigated by a few powerful, fanatical individuals acting to further only their own prejudices or their own economic self-interest. And that was certainly the sordid story behind the criminalization and prohibition of marijuana, as many of you probably know. fueled by everything from William Randolph Hearst's introduction of the Mexican term marijuana for what has commonly been called to that point hemp or cannabis. He was preying on ethnic prejudices very deliberately. To Hearst and the DuPont Corporation vilifying hemp at a time when their own economic interests depended on paper being manufactured from wood pulp instead of hemp. To government officials lying that the American Medical Association supported outlawing marijuana when the AMA had in fact strongly opposed that policy, only to change its position 2 years later after the Federal Bureau of Narcotics had punished the AMA for its opposition to prohibition by bringing thousands of prosecutions against doctors for allegedly prescribing narcotics for illegal purposes. So the story of how marijuana was transformed